Hi, Carrie.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here for the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. I am so honored and excited to hear about your empowered journey as a performing artist and a really thriving community member here in Portland. It's so fun to see you pop up at all these wonderful events around town. I would love to hear, what is your cultural background and upbringing, and how has it shaped the woman you are today?
My cultural upbringing is an interesting one. I'm a mixed racial background. I won't say ethnic background, racial background. My mom is white Caucasian, and my father African American. Both of my parents, I'm 10th generation American on my mom's side and 12th generation on my dad's side. And, you know, there's so much to say, but...
Your father was a Black Panther.
My father was a Black Panther.
I was reading on IMDB.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
I remember reading Seize the Time by Bobby Seale in high school and being a revolutionary-minded person, just so inspired by him and that book in particular, and then just diving into understanding who are the Black Panthers and their platform.
You know, it's really interesting having that is a cultural touch point for me, because my father was so engaged in civil rights, human rights. He was a government leader in Portland. He was a community leader in Portland. He was a social worker. He taught throughout his entire life. In fact, growing up, I grew up predominantly with my mother in the San Juan Islands, and my father lived in Portland. They met here at Portland State University. And it was really interesting because when I would come and visit my father, I always felt jealous because he had like 1 million children. They were children of single moms. They were children of, you know, kids from hard upbringing, just kids from the community who really needed a strong father figure, and he was a father figure to all of them. And so wherever we went, you know, he was constantly, you know, talking with, playing with, you know, engaging with the community. And I was like, you're my dad, I'm here to visit you, and how come I have to deal with all these stupid people? So, not the most enlightened for a really, really long time, actually. Still working on it.
So that's incredible that he was able to really expand you to see what it means to be part of a community, to be a leader, and to be an activist too.
Absolutely, and I miss him. He passed away 5 years ago now. And looking at our current cultural state and global state, really, I often think about what he would say. You know, I should have my WWFD, you know, what would Floyd do, little bracelet.
So what would he say?
I think he would say, first of all, that everything is cyclical, and not to be swayed by the mass hysteria, and to really go back and look at the humanity of all people, and to recognize that all people are maybe functioning from a place of stress, functioning from a place of fear, and how does that bond us as humans, and then using that as a platform to connect. You know, he was a philosopher in addition, an incredible philosopher, and so his house was always filled with people having conversations, and always from multiple, you know,
Walks of life.
Walks of life, yeah. And so that was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't, you know, these discussions could get heated, but it was always, you know, welcomed, and a recognition for the passion that was driving these people, and that these people we're us. We are these people. We are passionate because we look for the safety of our families and our communities and ourselves and our idea of the ideal, right? And I think for most all people, that ideal is a harmony. And when that is challenged, that's when we start acting irrationally. We get further and further away from that kernel of what we ultimately desire, because we become so reactionary to all these things happening around us. And so if we
and how interesting there was dynamism in the dialogue of welcoming the space. So he was really holding that dynamic container for the complex interplay rather than just homogenous story.
Incredible to watch. Yeah.
And I want to go into how that influenced you, and yet I'm so curious, what was his upbringing and background?
His upbringing, he was brought up predominantly by his father. His mother died when he was really young. He was one of 5 boys. And he was very close with his mom, and they lived in San Antonio, Texas. And after she passed, his father worked for the railroad and moved the boys to California, to Los Angeles, and met a woman there, and they had additional children, a couple of daughters. And
a railroad man?
A railroad man, yeah.
Was his father.
Was his father, my father's father. And I think, my dad was born in 42. So
a very different time.
A very different time.
And yet so many similar themes, yet in a different context.
Completely. He was fighting for equality that we are still continuing that fight for, but the stakes were different, not so different, but they were different. We are in a much different place because of the efforts that his generation put forth to make sure that, we had a standard of equality and, again, civil rights. And what they were fighting for as Black Panthers were those rights, and the safety of the African Americans at that time and for future generations.
So powerful for you to be connected to that lineage. How has that shaped your voice and your artistry, your empowered journey as an artist?
It's interesting. We'll go back. I'm sorry, I keep bumping my microphone. Sorry, you guys. But my upbringing, my mom and my dad split when I was 2.5, and we moved up to the San Juan Islands to live with my grandparents who retired up there.
Peaceful.
Very peaceful, very affluent, very homogenous, very artistic, and very, very connected to nature.
Sounds like a lot of freedom for a young child to grow up in.
Incredibly free, absolutely.
And yet the homogenous nature of it too.
Right, and you don't realize that you are different. And I just received over 100 photos of my grandmother and my great aunts growing up, and they came from the East Coast. They were raised in New York and Boston, and they had a country farmhouse in New Jersey, and their lineage was very, very affluent. It was Boston and New York society, and my great-grandmother decided to break from that, and she wanted to raise her children differently, with a different set of values.
More connected to nature, or?
More connected to the people. So she and her husband, who was a doctor, they became very involved in social work and, again, fighting for the rights of people who were starving, or immigrants and women, and people who were really struggling to make it day to day and raise their families, and who were so hardworking and didn't have the time and or education to fight for themselves in the country that they were living in at that time. So it's really interesting because that has certainly carried through as a motif. But in addition, the thing that came through in these photos was this incredible freedom that these 3 daughters were raised with. You could tell that they had the freedom of imagination, and they were able to explore and have great curiosity. And this is coming out of the Victorian age into the 20s, and then into the 30s, and their level, you can tell that there was still a certain level of affluence because they weren't tied down to the struggles of day to day. And I think that that is something that came through with my mother. My grandmother, she rode her bicycle from Boston in the 40s rode her bicycle cross country with her sister.
Oh my gosh.
To attend art school at the University of Washington.
Amazing.
Incredible.
What a journey.
Incredible. And so there's this pioneering spirit, this very independent, striving for art, striving for exploration. I've got to find out what's out there. I have to push myself to find out what my own limits are. And I think on both sides of my family, I feel that, right? For my dad, it is this, I've got to push through to find out what is on the other side of this oppression, to stand up and take the brunt of whatever is coming at people because I'm strong enough to do it. And I think for my grandmother and her sister who rode out here, it was the same thing. It's like, I have to do this to prove it to myself that I'm strong enough for whatever is ahead in my future, right? That might come at me and create obstacles, to know that I can overcome them. And then how rich will life be, and how many stories will I have, and how broad will my perspective be?
The indomitable human spirit and the hero or heroine's journey
Absolutely.
On their quest.
And that is absolutely what I grew up with, as well as my siblings, as well as a lot of the children that I grew up with in my community. The people that live on the islands face a certain type of life struggle. You are exposed to the elements. We have fabulous storms that come through, and they are so exciting and terrifying, and you have the wind that's bringing down the trees, and it's making these huge, swells in the water, and you've got to get across that water in order to get home, or, whatever it is. And so the number of times that we found ourselves in this inclement weather and finding out what you are actually capable of is incredible. And I think that it creates this spirit of you really see the limitations that people impose upon themselves, and you can say, I see those limitations, and I'm, for myself, not going to buy into those same limitations, because I know that there's possibility.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
And I may not be sure what the path is, but I know that it's out there, and I know it probably won't kill me to go and seek it out. So I'm going to do
Exciting.
that. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm. And then who modeled to you that you could become an actress as a child, or who were your early kind of expanders for your subconscious mind to say, oh, this is an option? You began acting at a very young age.
I did, and I started through dance. I loved the idea of storytelling and moving through space, and what it felt like on the skin, and what the sun felt like, and what the grass felt like, and how do we move through that, and how does that influence, what does that simple gesture say? with the idea of story connected to it. I think I was always connected to the idea of story. I was very, very imaginative, loved stories. The really neat thing about growing up in the San Juan Islands is it's very connected to native cultures. So we had a number of different tribes who would make the islands their homes during the summer, who settled in a lot of the surrounding valleys, and so there's an incredible connection to native tribes. And so the storytelling element was very, very strong growing up. You had storytellers everywhere. And not only that, it draws a number of artists because they can work independently. There's so much to draw on. That there was artistic stimulation everywhere. And so it was like, choose what you want to try on and try it on and explore it.
Amazing.
And explore what it feels like to tell the story of beauty, or tell the story of sound, or tell the story of, the wind. Like, what is that like? And so, I think ever since I was really little, that artistic element has always been there. It's like, explore whatever you want to explore and see what fits. And
so the stage was set for you.
Absolutely.
And then how did you move forward from there as an actress? And of course, you have your favorite moments, but I would love to hear about your journey.
I moved from dance into theater, I guess through dance and through school, and moved a little bit into modeling. I was really interested in exploring how to tell the story of beauty and nostalgia in a way that people could understand it. It was translatable. And so exploring the different methods of getting that story across. And I really connected with the idea of acting as a storytelling vehicle. And I remember when I was talking with my grandmother about how to move forward in life, I said, I really love acting, but Mom doesn't think that that's something that's, the smartest decision for my life. And she said, I think you're very talented at it, and I think that you should pursue whatever you want to. And, I think it would be a shame for you not to explore it.
So she held the vision for you.
She did, and,
It's so important to have someone who will hold that space for us.
Absolutely. And she being a painter and somebody who raised her children on her art, that was really powerful for me to hear that from her. And it kind of gave me the permission I needed to say, okay, well, let's explore. And it probably won't kill me, so let's try it out.
If these storms did it.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really influential. I was really influenced by, early on, her stories of the Depression, and for me, I loved Shirley Temple as a young performer, and she was performing as an adult. I could see the responsibility on her shoulders, and I felt the responsibility of keeping an entire country entertained during a really hard time. And from a very early age, I said, entertainers will always be employed. They will always be needed.
I always felt that way too.
Right? Yeah. There's always going to be a need to make somebody smile or feel.
And that storytelling is so ancient, and our human brains can stay engaged in storytelling all day long. It's one of those things that we naturally and effortlessly are attracted to.
It is. It is. So that was a big influence for me. I also loved the idea of Princess Grace and then Princess Di. I had this idea that I wanted to marry a prince because I wanted to be able to have freedom. And for some reason, I was connected to this antiquated idea. Well, not for some reason. I was connected to this antiquated idea of what was possible for women. And I said, okay, if I'm going to have any limitations, they're probably going to be connected to being a woman and what her duties are. So if I need freedom from that, let me get with the most powerful person I can think of. And I decided that a prince was going to be it. And I said, okay, well, how is a prince going to find me in this small, remote location? Well, they could be connected to somebody like Princess Grace, who was an actress, and he found her because she was an actress. So this is all working out for me, that, I can put my energies into this, and then I can connect to, this powerful position of being princess, and then you can do whatever you want. So I think, those were kind of some early influences for me.
Princess Grace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Shirley Temple.
And Shirley Temple.
And your grandmother.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So then you left the islands and you moved to Portland,
I
and
moved
you
to
also
Paris.
Paris. That's right. I was reading about that. And you were in the fashion styling world as well there.
Yeah, I started out modeling. I went over as a nanny, an au pair, and went to school to study French language, and was still really connected to this idea of beauty and storytelling and nostalgia, and how did that translate when you were using a different language and in a different culture.
Paris is the perfect place for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I became involved in the fashion industry, first as a model and then as a stylist, styling my own photos, and then photographers who I was working with, and their photographer peers started seeing those photos and saying, hey, who's doing the styling? And so I kind of made a little career niche for myself and began.
And what do you think made you stand out as a stylist? I have my suspicions. What do you think?
I think it was the exploration of story, of narrative. And again, I was so tied to the idea of nostalgia. I love the idea of light, and how does that convey a time, or how do we take this time and, through lighting, create this ambiance that
transports you to another time. Time travel.
Absolutely, time travel, or implants a strong memory. Something that you'll look back on and you can associate with a really specific time and place.
Being connected to the past, that ancestry, that tradition.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I would hope that that's what it was. I felt very, the shoots were very intuitive, and I had a strong connection with the models, having come from that side of things. I also had no intimidation of beauty, and one of the most profound experiences I had being in Paris, I had thought at one point in time, well, maybe I'll be a model. And then living in Paris for even a short period of time, you pass, 10 supermodel status models within a 1-block radius, because it draws the most beautiful people in the world. And they're so statuesque, and they're, at that time it was the height, and, Kate Moss was the exception to the rule. And
because she's 5'6".
Yeah. Right. And so it was really freeing to be able to walk down the street and say, oh, that's a model. Okay, I get it. I don't have, because I don't stack up to those, and I don't particularly feel that it's my calling to do the work to be a model, then I have now the freedom of not being a model. Right?
You're like, well, that's that. I don't have to do that.
I don't have
Although
to
you
pursue
are a
that.
model. I bet you model all the time now.
Because,
but not runway.
Not runway, not this high fashion modeling that was,
Of that time.
Of that time,
before.
Right? It was like, I'm going to strive to be this model. I did not feel any draw to do that. And I was like, great, I have so many things to offer. I am still connected to the creative energy of this
And that's what's so
It says-
exciting about fashion is the artistry, the creativity, the curation, all of the details, and the brilliant minds that it's drawn to, and the way they use fashion to tell a story.
Yeah.
There's so many dynamics there.
Absolutely. And tapping into the creative artistry, then, and removing the ego or that need, that desire, that drive, which can turn so ugly, right?
The fashion world bringing up so much shadow.
Yeah.
I feel like now they're working towards
They really are.
moving away from that, especially in the US.
Yeah.
I heard Europe's lagging behind.
Well,
Because I was watching Anna
understandably.
Wintour's masterclass.
Yeah. Understandably, they are very tied to tradition.
Yeah.
But it was really freeing. And because of that, I got to work with so many designers and artists across the board, because we're working on a creative, collaborative way. And so it just sparked joy all over the place.
Amazing. And was
It's
that
wonderful.
your first foray into media and cameras, or were you already into photography?
Well, I was really interested in photography, and before I left, I ended up doing a photo spread that did a national or international tour with a really well-known fashion photographer that we shot here in Portland. And because of that, I also felt like I got my need to do any of that out, and still have these incredible, beautiful photos from that time that ties me.
Beautiful.
So,
And
yeah.
then from there, an evolution. What was the evolution of the story into acting? And then
I know.
And
They're looking at our time. Yeah. Well, I think through that, I left Paris and I moved to Portland. I wanted to be close to my dad. I had never lived with him full time. I was really, knew that there was a lot of work I needed to do, kind of in my own healing, and moving forward, my relationship with men, I needed to fill that father void that I had. And while I was here, I was seeking work in the fashion industry, which there was none at that time.
Small town.
None. We had Jansen swimwear and we had Columbia sportswear, and that was it. And I was looking for a job as a stylist, and neither of them had positions or any interest in me. So I went
Well,
down.
sucks for them.
Sucks for them, but it worked out in the end. I could be doing something completely different.
Yeah.
But
You were being guided to act.
I was, and I started working as a teacher for models, and then became an agent for a modeling agency.
And how interesting that all these pieces come into play as an actress.
They do. From there, I was taken to Hawaii, where I worked in a modeling agency, and through that, we created a project with the E! Network, which just predated America's Next Top Model, where we brought models in and did kind of a models boot camp.
Very cool.
And it was on camera, and so I got to work kind of and bring out my producing capacity
Nice.
in that realm, which was great. And then I realized that I was helping other people achieve what I wanted to be doing. So I moved back to
And
Portland.
that's so interesting. We were talking about giving your power away also, but also just tiptoeing in. Of course, it doesn't have to be so dramatic. So how did you take your power back?
I said, bye. I need to now take all of this knowledge that I have and go back and pursue what I love, and that was acting.
And was it hard to accept that? That was what you truly wanted to do? Was it scary?
No, it was
or was
great.
it just naturally like,
Yeah,
this is it?
totally. All along you feel like all of these. My friend Jo, who I met in Paris, if you're seeing this, hi Jo, I miss you. She was from New Zealand, she'd always say, I'll see you in the soup, right? Which means, see you in the melee of this crazy world that we're in. And I always loved the idea of that, right? We're throwing all these elements into the soup. And I felt like all of my life experiences were being thrown into this big pot that ultimately were going to support me in what I wanted to be doing.
I love that.
Yeah, and that
Nothing is wasted.
nothing is wasted, right? And we're just tasting all of these different elements, but at the core, I felt really connected to the core of what I wanted, and it was being reinforced through all of my experiences. And I knew at that point in time that, okay, I'm ready now to take what I've accumulated and move forward and see what I have to now add moving forward. We've got our base. Let's
Nice. The broth is ready.
The broth is ready. So I moved back to Portland and started working in theater and going to school. And pretty soon, and I was also moonlighting as an assistant casting director and
In it.
All in. And pretty soon I was working so much as an actor that I left school. And I was kind of on the path of working full-time as an actor, and I was 21.
Fantastic, all that. Just to get to 21.
21.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing, and yet you had those early experiences also acting.
Yeah.
I was reading on IMDB
Yeah.
also, and then coming full circle, committing fully. The stage is set, the career is in motion at the age of 21. What do you feel is your unique experience of being empowered as an actor, and what wisdom or lessons could you offer to other aspiring actresses? I feel like myself, I studied Meisner, and then I felt, this is kind of I feel disempowered. It was my own projection. Let me be a director and a filmmaker and get behind the camera so I can make my own work and produce, rather than just being the one who's chosen if I'm good enough. So I wonder if there's like a shadow there that you could help address if you ever felt that way, or maybe
I feel that way now. I have been struggling recently, feeling really challenged in that sense. Feeling now that I don't know what it is. I'm definitely projecting. I'm trying to figure it out currently.
Tell me all about it.
It's spraying everywhere.
What's happening?
What is happening? I think people looking from the outside say, oh my gosh, last season I did 4 shows back to back at my resident theater. I'm a resident artist of Artist Repertory Theater.
Yay! That's incredible,
great.
and so good to celebrate that achievement.
Thank you. I didn't expect it. I didn't think I asked for it, and when it was offered to me, I kind of went, yeah, sure, I guess. But I don't know that I'm sticking around, but if you guys want to give that to me, I guess that's fine, I don't care. And it's been really interesting to see how that's evolved. I'm in the application process for a fellowship grant that will be in collaboration with Artist Repertory Theater as my host theater. And through that, I want to explore what it means. This is coming around to that feeling of projection. I've been feeling marginalized, I think, and feeling that as an actor, my voice doesn't have the weight or authority I would like it to have, the weight I would like for it to have. And struggling, feeling like, feeling less inclined to collaborate on a project and feeling very tied to my own sense of entitlement. And I think it's because I've been tired. I think I burn
Cycles.
out. And
what's so interesting though is going to hear Francis Ford Coppola speak at the Schnitzer.
I did too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So we're all about tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like seeing how much he honors and respects the actor, and that's how he gets these incredible life-changing performances. So it's also a dynamic interplay. It's not just us, and yet too, like Rami Malek was saying after winning the Oscar that he was really mad at the director. And he was like, I'm an empowered actor. Like, I'm not gonna take this. But yet too, it's a complex interplay and dynamic, and we can play different roles too within it. So it's just interesting to see how we're co-creating together, and that teamwork is the master class. Absolutely. And then our relationship with the director, or the director's relationship with the actor, is so important.
Well, I think especially now, as we're seeing this wave of empowerment, definitely across the country, right? We're seeing marginalized voices coming out and saying, no, you will hear me. I have a valid voice. I do have authority. I do have urgency in this matter. And I'm really interested to see that coming through in the acting world. Because for so long, actors have not just taken a backseat, taken the backseat to everything.
Think of Judy Garland, famously, and their experience as like churning out films, and then some actors being glorified, and then the huge disparity.
Yeah.
And then now seeing all of these wonderful dynamic stories, and it's not that it's the height of, but maybe just the beginning of having the stories of the mothers told, having the stories of the Black families told, like with Raising Dion or whatever on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of part of my this fellowship grant that I'm going for, is really exploring how are we telling stories of using my own voice and my own life experience, but how are we telling stories of people of color, of African Americans, of African American women of a certain age, and how are these stories different than what we've seen traditionally, which is, oh, you're African American, here's your story. It's really clear. Here you are. You're from the inner city.
This is the story that the white men are comfortable telling.
Yeah, and it is so marginalized. It is so demeaning. It is a handed power. We will see you achieve power under these circumstances and these circumstances only. Not even thinking for a moment that of every single person of color you're portraying, they have, a huge expanse of stories that, very few of them are similar to the one that you're having them tell, and yet you're wanting them to fit into this inauthentic space, and it just perpetuates. It's played out. And how did then we buy into that? I buy into it, as a person of color, right? I put on this accent, I put on this style when I go into an audition, because you read it on the page, oh, that's what they're looking for. I will serve this up to them. And, the fear is for us actors that, well, you break away from that, then they're not going to cast you. Okay.
And what's so exciting is having Black women, having these different dynamic come into play. I felt like a pivotal moment was when, like, Will Smith and everyone was like, we're not even going to the Oscars anymore. There was that year, remember? They were like, we're not going anymore. And then there was a little bit of a change happening.
Right.
And yet still, like in Raising Dion, they're making fun of the white savior story. She's making fun of a lot of the stories, but even still now, like, the white savior story, Viggo Mortensen, like, kind of shyly on the side, accepting the award for Green Mile or whatever.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that there is a shift in changing, and then how do we just interact and engage, and
is that the
and to have that meaningful, engaged dialogue with other artists who are interested in creating. And
absolutely. Yeah. So it's a lot. It's a big. There's a lot to bite off there. But I think, again, coming back to that idea of the human connection, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these human stories that transcend. And I think for all the differences, and we're seeing such a polarized country, we're coming from such this crazy polarized place, and trying to villainize people, trying to other people in this way,
which is so interesting, because it's a way of storytelling, and it's a way of getting people you know, those who tell the stories rule the world.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting, even the story of vilifying, it's done to get it to sensationalize, but what would it be like to ask, like, what were the conditions that created this situation, and dive deeper into, like, what are the unmet needs here, and go deeper.
And find that they're universals.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's where I'm at in my journey. I have been struggling, you know, and I went from having a great deal of work last year to having nothing. I have a show, which I'm very excited about, coming up with Portland Center Stage, which will be my first show at Portland Center Stage. They've had a major shakeup, and I'm looking forward to experiencing working with them and seeing how I feel as an artist under their umbrella. But I'm really interested in more of a universal stage, you know, and really getting out into the world, still exploring my craft. You know, my idea has been that it doesn't matter where you are, you can be doing your work in Los Angeles and New York and Japan, and
like at the with the refugee children from Syria.
Absolutely.
You were in one of their stories. I was able to see
Yeah,
you. So I would love to hear, because I mean, I do feel you are a leader, especially as an actor in Portland. I think you're looked up to as in that way. Big fish in a small pond. And how do you feel your activism and your, like, willingness to participate in things like the working with the Syrian refugee children, and like they are writing plays for deep psychological healing, and then you're acting in the play as the role of the horse, right?
Right.
So how does that feel to be able to be of service, and whether you're on a stage, you know, at a prestigious venue, or able to use your craft to support local projects? How does it feel to be a leader? Or a community member, humbly.
You know, we talk about being imperfect. You know, the truth is, so often it comes down to, yes, I just faced this. I'm excited to be working with Bruce Livingston, who is the creator of Playwright, who did host this event as part of their fundraiser, and working with these incredible kids, these incredible refugees, who were telling stories and using this storytelling as an outlet and a form of expression for what they're going through, and how they're processing what they've been through, and how they're seeing the world. And the optimism was incredible, right? And I love being able to do that. And two, we're still at this place where actors are always being asked to work and contribute their work, their craft, for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as I want to be able to do those projects and support, you know, what I feel is pivotal work being done, I constantly have to be balancing out, do I have enough finances in my coffers to have gas in my tank to get me to that
absolutely
event. I would love to say, oh, well, you know, it's fabulous and I love giving back. And I have to be able to say, I would love to be able to do that. Is there, you know,
of course, and filling our
is there
own
a stipend
cup
connected?
first.
I can't.
And that's why I'm so excited about empowering soulpreneur women, artists, yoginis, healers to manifest their six-figure income and impact, so that they are fully financed and supported. If you think about how much money is in the world, you know, there's more than enough. So it's interesting to see, like, how we can build that, especially as an actor, taking our power back.
It's true.
And then two, the role of the actor in society, being celebrated, being appreciated, being honored. It's interesting, you know, there's live performance is so powerful. You know, so it's interesting to think of that. And
It is. I think the idea of taking your power back, I don't find that artists often come into this world with that type of power. We have to learn what that power is, and then we have to learn how it applies to us, the value of it, and then negotiating to get any of it. I've never found that it's getting my power back. It is an uphill struggle to learn that it is even something that I want to desire or need to desire in order to be able to exist in this world as it is. Our world as we've created it is not supportive of artists, and in order for us to, be able to survive, we have to take so many hits to the body, and that's what I find that our societies aren't structured to support the artists, and so we have to wear all of these different hats in order to get where we are. I don't even see myself as a big fish in a small pond. I see myself as an artist who is continuing to learn how to adapt, a fish who's having to learn how to adapt, right? You gain the skills in order to get to the next job that pays higher. And then you take artistic steps backwards because you're striving to then meet these financial goals. So then you have to struggle to learn how to marry your artistic endeavors with the demands of the industry, right? And then how do we push the industry forward, and how do we get our own needs met so that we don't burn out and we don't feel unheard or unvalidated, or I think that is a constant struggle. And I would say to any artist out there, any actor out there, to continue to form your communities and your groups, and your support structures, because it is incredibly challenging to do it on your own.
Which is so interesting. Having spent a lot of time in art communities in India, like the Indian government actually allocates a lot of money to the arts.
Yeah.
And you'll never have a wedding without having music, dance, and drama.
Right.
So, and the weddings, they're like a lot of money devoted for that. So it's interesting just to come from a different culture where arts are such an integral, foundational part. Not that people are making a big amounts of money, but it's just a different relationship. And then having our needs met here in a different culture, and it's like, how are we building community to support our artists? Very interesting.
I would imagine in India, but there's still negotiation. Mm-hmm. You still have to fight your way up the totem pole to dance, perform.
Weightiness of what you're saying, like the weight and the heaviness of it, and that civilizations rise and fall by the arts. So how important it is. Tell us about the fellowship you're applying for, because receiving those grants and that support is so important.
I feel really fortunate. This fellowship feels like it was dropped to my lap, but another resident artist at Artist Repertory Theater sent out an email. She's a playwright, and she's incredible and receives a lot of grants and is really savvy when it comes to that. And this one was specific to actors. It is an actors only grant. And it's the TCG Fox Fellowship grant. And they are looking for, they've got two different categories. One is Distinguished Achievement, and the other is Outstanding Achievement, I believe. One is a $15,000 grant, the other is a $25,000 grant. One is 10 years plus experience, the other is 20 years plus experience. And they're looking for applicants who have a strong connection with EDI workings, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion, which we're seeing a lot of as theater companies, as businesses are using EDI as a platform to talk about race, gender, inclusion, and diversity and equity in their companies. And so it asks the actor to come up with examples of how they would use this money. this fellowship grant, and how they would incorporate the EDI practices. And it can be used towards education, advanced education, which is what I'm looking to use it towards. And specifically in both looking at master classes. For myself, this would be an incredible opportunity to go back and get the education, both that I feel I'm looking forward to reinforce my foundation, but also how do I dive deeper? You know, I found myself becoming complacent, finding myself often in situations where I don't feel challenged by the director, and maybe the director doesn't have as much experience, or they have other things on their plate. How do you become director proof, or how do you become director, how do you enhance the project? You know, how can you communicate and work differently, more effectively, deeper in your work? And my goal is always to do the best work that I can possibly do, and I feel like this will help me then reach a new level of doing the best work I can possibly do, right? Stretching myself. And then I'm also looking at speaking with theaters who have addressed this issue of race and are working to become more complex in their storytelling and complex in their relationship with their creatives, with their actors, with their directors, with their storytellers, to create more complex stories that include race. And ideally for me, I would like, when we sit down to address a play, to talk about what are the qualities that each person is bringing to that table right off the bat. What are their unique perspectives as they enter the room? Because they may be being asked to play a character, but how does their life influence how they're addressing their character choices? And how do we honor that? And how do we learn from that? So there are a couple of theater companies I'm really interested in talking to and learning from, both in Harlem and Sweden. And then there's a theater company in the south of France where I have actually set the setting for a screenplay slash adapted play that I've been working on for the last number of years, loosely based on my work in Paris.
Exciting.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so that's all part of how I would like to use that grant.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then start ultimately fleshing out this story that I would like to work in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Beautiful. I have one more question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think it was percolating. To have this inclusive dialogue and to create even better art that really serves all of the audience, what do you feel are some ways that we can create the space to have this engaged dialogue within the creative circle, you know, as a team, as a community, rather than have everything be in one person's hands who's the boss, or for example, you know? So how do we invite in this engaged and open dialogue? What is maybe even the mindset to cultivate, or how do we open that door?
It's a good question, which I think is what I'm in search of.
Mm-hmm.
I have started teaching classes, and one of the ways I like to approach, and I think is really helpful, is actually incorporating body work, movement, breath work into those opening days. As you were saying earlier, right? Shared breath. I think bringing that room to a place of equality and balance through those shared movements, shared breath, mutual understanding of our space, really creating a space of harmony and inclusion, and not just looking at it as a thing to check off the list before we get to do the real work. That is the work, and that's something we'll carry with us throughout the entire process. And it's a way for us to check in with one another. The director is included in that. I think that's a really good foundation, a good place to start from.
Honoring the creative process. It's like the roots create the fruits, or how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's so important that the whole process is integral.
Absolutely.
I love that. Beautiful. How can we support you and honor you? Where can we find you online, or can we come to your shows, engage with you?
Absolutely. It's funny. I'm sure a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with social media. You can always find me on social media.
Which I love following.
Thank you. You can find me through Ayanna Berkshire on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and through my upcoming website, which is being reconfigured. And then support me through my IMDB page, which it's funny we don't think of, but of course the more hits somebody gets on IMDB, the more it lifts them and they are seen by the industry.
Right, everyone go to Ayanna.
Yeah, Ayanna Berkshire on IMDB. It actually really helps.
Well, I'm glad I'm saying your name right.
Yeah. Well,
Yanni.
Carrie knows me as Yanni,
Berkshire.
absolutely, which is a nickname. And then I try to keep things updated. I've got an incredible fan base through the work I did with Twilight.
Yay!
Yeah,
Which
movie
is
based on the
exciting.
book series by Stephanie Meyer. And so I really try to keep things up to date. I also try to keep things engaged and really connect with my fans, for who I am so grateful. Thank you. And I think a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the pushing forward and the exploration of ideas that I'm doing are for our fan base as well, right? It's we're all moving forward together. So how do I use myself as an example of taking those difficult steps or having the difficult conversations so that we can all do them and find vulnerability and truth and honesty? I think that those are all foundational and things that in this world we don't want to lose.
Absolutely. So beautiful. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Definitely go on to her IMDb,
Yeah.
Yanni's IMDb, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.